So I'm going to be talking about the first two things up here, how to attract prospects, so how to get them to know about your webinar and then to sign up for it and then to actually attend it, and then how to structure your webinar effectively and some of the different ways that you can do that and some of the things that we've seen be effective. I had a call yesterday with a CMO of a division of a Fortune 500 insurance company, and they've got, like 50 divisions and all that kind of stuff, huge, massive, multi-billion-dollar company. And we were talking about, how my company can help him run webinars on an ongoing basis to grow their business and to build their brand and attract more prospects. And I asked them the question, because they're going after other very large companies, very senior level, C-level people. I said, do you think these people that you're trying to go after are actually going to attend one of your webinars? These guys are really busy. Do you think that they're going to be into this? And he said, without a doubt, he knows that if the webinar, if the message resonates with them, if the CEO he's trying to reach won't watch it, he will delegate it down to the person that will. And they see it happen all the time, as long as the topic is something that's relevant and they need to know about. And so the reason I mention that is because I hear from people very often who seem to have webinar fatigue and think that webinars just aren't as effective as they were in the past because it's becoming played out and people are tired of them and such. And conversations like that and the experience that we have in our business and our clients and the stuff I'm going to show you today says that that's just generally not the case. There are people out there that have watched so many webinars and sat behind their computer so long that they feel like that. But I think on the whole, webinars are still a tremendously effective way to market your business, generate leads, and increase sales. And the Marketing Prof study that Bill cited is just another piece of proof about that. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into using webinars and how we've become successful with using them and why I should be able to talk about this stuff today. I started working for myself in 2010 as an outsourced CFO for small businesses here in town. And I did, our first webinar was, I did a joint venture webinar with a banker just to do it and try and market my business, and had 20 people sign up. And I think at one point there were 5 attendees. But what happened was that we had an audio meltdown, and so that webinar never happened. So my first attempt at using a webinar was a big failure. And so one of the lessons from that for me was, don't use the cheap free webinar platforms that are enticing. And ever since then, I've used GoToWebinar for everything, and it's really the gold standard. So there's one tip. In 2011, some of my clients that I was doing finance work for started saying, hey, I see some of the things that you're doing on LinkedIn to grow your business. Would you help us do some of those things? And I looked around for somebody to refer them to and couldn't find any competent marketers that really knew what they were doing with LinkedIn. And so I said, sure, I'll help you out. And at the same time, I threw up a new website called linkedselling.com, and I figured maybe there's some other businesses that would be interested in these kinds of services, and it's really exploded since then. Our company's grown from me working out of my house to now I have 8 employees. We have clients all over the world that we run lead generation campaigns for within LinkedIn. Very early on, we were utilizing webinars as our primary source of attracting business all over the world. And what we found was that the majority of the people on those calls actually weren't going to hire us. We would get business from a small percentage of the people, but then there's this whole other 100 people on the webinar or whatever it might be who are more of the do-it-yourselfer crowd. And so that's why we created Linked University, which is our online training program. So between Linked Selling, Linked University, and helping our clients, over the last 2.5 years or so, we've done hundreds of webinars, tens of thousands of people have attended them, and it's been the primary source of new leads and revenue for our business. And actually just about a week ago, we formally launched a new division called Webinarly, which is an outsourced marketing department for your webinars, for people who say, you know what, figuring out all this stuff just isn't in the cards for me, I want some help with it. So that's me. Now what I'm going to talk about today is the stuff that is on really this side of the screen. So I'm going to have to move fast. There's a lot to go through. All right, but that's not to minimize the importance of what happens after the webinar, which is what Tom's going to talk about. All right, because doing the webinar, attracting people to the webinar really is just the start of what hopefully will be a long-term relationship in nurturing prospects and working some of them towards becoming your clients. So here's what we're going to talk about in the first part, which is attracting prospects. So this is all about how to design landing pages so that when you tell somebody, hey, here's a link to go check out to sign up for my webinar, that landing page has to convince them of why they should sign up and be willing to give you their email address and their time. I'm going to talk about some things you can do once they do sign up to help boost attendance, all right, so to get more of those registrants to turn into actual attendees. Organic strategies for promoting your webinars, and some paid strategies as well. So what can you do for free, and then if you have budget for advertising, what can you do there? All right, so with landing pages and with really designing your webinar in the first place, what we always tell people and what I do for my own business is I start first with what is the landing page design and what are the things that we can tell people that we're going to deliver during this training that will get them to sign up at a very high percentage. All right, so basically, what's the concept and what are the things that they can learn that will get people to say, yeah, I want this? And it's those ideas that then form the basis of what the landing page is going to include, and I'll go through some examples of that, but also then what you're going to do during the webinar. So typically, we think about what the landing page is going to be before we even build the PowerPoint of the webinar. So that's just something to think about for yourself. Now, in terms of tools to use, this is important stuff, obviously. I talked about how much I love GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar. But their landing pages are kind of crappy, and they're really plain and boring. And, you know, if you're marketing to, you know, your really close-knit community, you can get away with that, all right? If you start doing things to reach out beyond, you know, your own, you know, tight community, and people that don't already know you and know the value that you bring to the table in webinars, you need to step it up a notch. And one of the tools that we use all the time to do that is a landing page platform called Unbounce. And it's a very simple to use. I don't want to overstate the simplicity of it. But you don't need to be a programmer, and you can create landing pages that look however you want. And it comes out of the box with all sorts of different templates that you can use. And it also integrates with a lot of different things, which I'll talk about in a minute. And this is an example of a landing page template that we use for a lot of webinars that converts really well, much better than the standard GoToWebinar one that you see people use. Another really popular software is Leadpages. Both Leadpages and Unbounce are going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 a month, something like that. And it goes up from there, depending on, you know, more features, more, you know, traffic and things like that. But it doesn't go up too much more than that. So Leadpages is really, really popular, and it's good for the key benefit Leadpages has over Unbounce is that all of their themes and templates are responsive, so mobile friendly, right out of the chute. Unbounce can't really say that, although they're improving in that area. So that's definitely a key thing Leadpages has over them. But Leadpages is far less customizable than Unbounce. So in certain situations, Leadpages just isn't an option because of that. If you want to do something really specifically and have your own design and things like that, that's where Unbounce really shines, as well as Unbounce's ability to integrate with a lot of other things. Leadpages is good with that too. And so with these platforms, they all tie into GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar. And so that any of the people that sign up through this landing page software, which can be hosted on your domain, will automatically go into the different places you need them to go. And here's something to think about too. With landing pages, you can create just one single landing page, all right, that is going to try to speak to everybody that could potentially be interested in what you do. But probably for most of us, we have some different niches, industries, verticals, types of people that you market to and do business with, right? And so here's an example of something we've seen. And I'm just going to click through all these really quickly and just, you know, you can probably see the moral of the story here, but these are all promoting the same webinar, all right? They're just different landing page variants that we're using in different ad campaigns that target these different types of people, all right? And what happens is that the moral of the story is that when you're marketing when your landing page, when your ads that promote the landing page speak directly to a certain type of person, the click-through rates and then the conversions on the landing pages go way up. Because people say, this isn't some generic LinkedIn webinar trying to cater to everybody. It's specifically for financial advisors. So when financial advisors see that, they're all over it. And so you can see that's a huge improvement in conversions on that landing page. Same with coaches and consultants. All right, so when we use LinkedIn sponsored updates to target business coaches and business consultants, they see this landing page and it converts extremely well. And so these are examples of some conversions from a recent webinar. So the two of them were on the 29th, this one was the 21st, but you can see the improvement in that. So I would challenge you to think about how you can do that in your business. Unbounce is very user-friendly at doing this sort of thing. So you can really quickly duplicate one page, have a slightly different link for it, change 2 words on the landing page, and then have separate campaigns targeting different niches. And it works really well. You have to make sure when you're doing that, though, that, that the content is actually going to be very applicable to those types of people. All right, because you can't try and pull the wool over them and then have them show up and be like, wait a minute, I see what's going on here. That's no good for long term or short term. Another thing with landing pages is you always want to do social proof, and things like testimonials. So here, we always use this quote from the Huffington Post. We want to tell people, even though we're creating a custom landing page in a program like Unbounce, we're using GoToWebinar's logo on it so that people have something they're comfortable with and familiar with. So that'll improve conversions, and they'll also know that it's live, which is a big thing. People want to, conversions will improve when people know it's going to be live as opposed to automated. Now, testimonials, of course. If you have testimonials from people that have seen your trainings before, that can be used for these. And of course, if you've done the same webinar in the past, using testimonials that you get and feedback from people from those webinars is great. But if not, if it's not too far of a stretch, you can use just, if you've spoken in the past and someone has said, Dale is the best speaker I've ever heard, this was amazing. You could throw something like that on there as well. So I talked about integrations, and another tool you might want to check out is one called Zapier. Or Zapier. I'm honestly not sure how to pronounce it. But it's basically, I think their tagline is we got API in the middle. Because what they do is they integrate disparate platforms. And it's not just a webinar thing. It's all sorts of internet technology that you can tie together. So if you want, anytime you get a new LinkedIn contact, you want to put them in some Evernote file automatically. Zapier's got tasks that do that, and they have hundreds of different things that they tie together, and millions of different ways to use them. But what we primarily use it for is to make sure that people go from Unbounce into GoToWebinar and our email marketing software. All right, so that really, no matter what tools you're using, all this stuff ties together, because once somebody signs up for your webinar, it's really important that you don't then have to go manually put their information somewhere, And so these tools are a great way to get all that done. So let's talk now about things you can do before the webinar to make sure more people actually show up, which is always a good thing, because if you're spending a lot of time getting people, to say they want to show up, say they want to come, and then nobody shows, that's no good. And typically what we see is anywhere from 25 to 50% attendance, something like that is about what we expect. And so when you get to doing larger webinars with lots of people, it makes a difference to do the little things. So one thing we do for some of our webinars when it makes sense is calendar invites. So like this one's a personal invitation sent from Gmail to invite people to one of those webinars for financial advisors. And so it's just a personal touch, I think, that a lot of people don't get often when they're signing up for webinars. And these people don't know me. They signed up for a webinar that they found out about through an advertisement on LinkedIn. And so then, it's a big part of our strategy before the webinar to try and build a relationship a little bit, so that during the webinar, they've got a really good sense about who I am, who our company is, and feel real comfortable with us. And this is, I think, a nice way to do that. Another way you want to do that, of course, is with emails that happen before the webinar. So especially if people are signing up weeks in advance, 7, 10 days in advance or more, I would say, you got to keep them kind of excited. You know, you got to remind them why they signed up in the first place. And one of the best ways to do that, and really I don't know a better way, and Tom might be able to speak about this at length more as well, but is some sort of an email autoresponder sequence that sends a couple emails to them prior to the event. Systems like GoToWebinar have a bit of a built-in reminder system that they can send automatic reminders at certain intervals, but they're not highly customizable, and they don't really let you tell the story that you want to tell before the webinar. Like this. I can't send an email like this through GoToWebinar's reminder system, you know. And so this is the kind of thing that we'll send before a webinar. And this is what we call pre-webinar bonus training. So this was for a webinar we did last August for CPA firms. And about 10 days before the actual event, I sent an email to everyone that had signed up so far and said, you know, what questions do you have about using LinkedIn? I want to answer them for you and make sure we cover them. Then a few days after that, after getting a bunch of responses from people, I got back to them with this email and said, hey, I got a lot of great questions, and I decided to put together a little bit of bonus training here for before the webinar. And what this allowed me to do was, one, knock out some of the silly questions that I didn't want to be focusing on during the primary webinar, so that we could really focus on our presentation and you know, structure things the way we want to structure them. But it just goes back to that relationship building thing. On this webinar, as you saw, as I'll show you a little bit later, we were offering people the opportunity to sign up for a program that was going to cost them, you know, a significant amount of money. And so it was very important for us to really build rapport and develop the relationship ahead of time so that a certain percentage of people would feel comfortable enough to make that commitment live on the webinar. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And so we create this video with Camtasia, and it's just a simple screencast, and goes through and shows them, you know, some answers to their questions and how to do certain things on LinkedIn. And that's pretty much how that goes. Another thing we'll do to boost attendance is to offer a free gift. And everyone's seen this done in the past, right? Or, you know, to attend something, you get some bonus, or, you know, whatever it might be, or if you're, you know, show up to the webinar to get this free XYZ. And it's essentially the same thing. But it does work, all right? But you have to tell people ahead of time that, hey, you have to attend to get this bonus, all right? And I really think that that tactic's been done so much that you also need to qualify it and say, this isn't your normal BS gimmicky bonus. And then tell them what the bonus is going to be, all right? Because people are tired of being like, oh, show up and I got a free gift for you. Well, I think your free gift is going to be a pile of crap. So, you know, that's not really an incentive for me, you know? But instead, if I tell people ahead of time that the bonus we're going to be giving away at the end today is over an hour of step-by-step video training on how to optimize your LinkedIn profile, and we're going to give full access to everybody that attends toward the end of the call, then people are thinking, well, that actually does sound like a nice bonus. I want to show up for that, you know, and it works really well. The other thing it works well for is that then the people that show up stay on till the bitter end, which is, you know, what we all want. And so let's talk about ways to get people to actually sign up in the first place. All right? So from an organic standpoint, of course, I'm talking about things you can do without spending money, but you just spending your time. Of course, you want to email your friends, your community, business associates. If you have an email list, which I know most of you do. If you don't, get going on that. You want to email your list and announce that you've got a webinar coming up. All those tactics are great and can have really good results for the first time you do a webinar. And you know, if you want to do the same webinar over and over again, let's say, wow, that was so great, I want to keep doing it. Well, you can't keep going back to the same people over and over again. But you can, every maybe 6 months or so, I think, is typically how we'll do it. So with our general email list, we will promote some sort of a LinkedIn webinar once every 6 months or so. It's not going to be the same one we already did. It's going to be something somewhat new, all right? But that's kind of how we have found it to be successful. If you just keep hammering people with the same thing over and over again, they'll unsubscribe pretty quickly. Of course, you want to be promoting via social, sharing on Facebook, Twitter, all the places that you can. If you've got a following in those places, sharing announcements about the upcoming webinar is something that's, is good. We don't see huge results from that on an ongoing basis. We do it and get some sign-ups from it, but not such a significant amount that we can just sit back and rely on it, not even close. But one of the other things from something you can do by just putting in a little sweat equity perspective is messaging prospects directly in LinkedIn groups. So this is an example of that, and I think we're going to pass around a sheet at some point today that if you want copies of the slides and some other things I'm going to talk about at the end, you can put your email address down. So don't feel like you need to write this verbatim. But using LinkedIn groups that you're a part of, you can go into those groups and directly message prospects that look like the right kind of people that you want attending your webinar, hopefully the kind of people that you want doing business with you. And then you can tell them like this, hey, Paul, I got a webinar coming up that's just for financial advisors. I'd love it if you'd show up. Here's the link. Thanks, Josh. And so these are personal one-on-one messages that are sent. So there is a bit of effort involved there, but there's no cost. And anybody can do this with a free LinkedIn account. So that's something that's big. So let's talk about paid advertising now. And there's a few specific things I'm going to talk about. Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, a little bit of Twitter, and then a couple other things related to partnerships. Now, Facebook advertising has been a really big deal for our business. Not all businesses is advertising on Facebook the right fit, but we find more and more that if we just talk about this ad here, if you know that your prospects read certain magazines or like certain people or follow certain websites or any of that kind of stuff, like what are your prospects into on Facebook? If you're targeting businesses, you can go out and target anybody that likes Vistage or EO or you name it, all those kinds of things. So there's ways to get to the types of people you're trying to get to no matter what. And essentially what you can do is you can have ads like this that show up in the news feeds of anybody you want to target, all right? And so in this ad, for example, we're targeting Canada and US, age 25 to 60, anybody that likes Mary Smith, GoToMeeting, Amy Porterfield, something I can't read, LinkedIn, under30ceo.com, Jay Bear, on startups, young entrepreneur, crazy egg, or social triggers. So for a LinkedIn webinar, we're thinking, what kind of people are going to be interested in this? And that's how we go about targeting those types of people. So this specific audience had 240,000 people. And you can get to millions, because obviously there's, I think, over 1 billion people on Facebook now, something like that. And you can set them up to target people on desktop, mobile, however you want. And you can see with this particular campaign what some of the results were in terms of clicks and such. One of the things that I think is going to be more relevant to most of you is what you can now do in terms of targeting people based on their job titles within Facebook. It's been slowly evolving and now has become a bit more accessible and I don't know if fully functioning is the right word, but within Facebook's Power Editor, which is their, I guess advanced ads manager, if you will, you can target just like this. So this ad could target anybody that's a president, CFO, CEO, or COO, or owner, Canada and US, reaches over 1 million people. You can also target based on industries. There's all sorts of other job titles, you name it, you can pretty much find it in there. The type of office they have, do they have a home office? Do they work in a big company? And I would really encourage you to go in and play around with the targeting. Even if you're not ready to spend money on Facebook now, go in there and play with the ads manager and what's called Power Editor, and just experiment with how you can target on Facebook. It's very interesting. You can leverage some of their data partners, who they have some, like 3 of the largest data research companies in the United States, like Epsilon, Datalogix, and something else. And these companies have so much information on us that it is really a little bit, kind of scary in some ways. But regardless, Facebook has partnered with these companies so that you can target people based on things like they bought a car within the last 6 months. Their household income is over X. They've got children, or they're single, or almost you name it. So it's not just this really high-level demographic data. It also gets into like psychographic stuff as well. What are their political affiliations? Are they Mexican? You name it. And there's a lot of ways to target, so whether B2B or B2C, it's really worth exploring. Another thing with Facebook that's really, really important that I think everybody should start doing almost right away is custom audiences. And what this is basically retargeting, all right? And so retargeting's been around a long time, but in the past you had to use third-party software like AdRoll or Perfect Audience to set up retargeting within Facebook. Well, now Facebook's got that natively within their Ad Manager or Power Editor. And what you can do is you can put a really simple script on your website, on the front of all your landing pages for webinars or ebooks or white papers. Anything that you've got out there on the internet, you can install really simple scripts and then be building audiences off of anybody that visits those pages to then show ads to them on Facebook at some point in the future, really whenever you want. And there are some limitations in some cases that we've seen. In some cases, they will only cookie that data for 180 days, things like that. But the power of that is then you're then showing ads to people on Facebook to promote your webinar, the people that have been to your website sometime recently, so they're familiar with you, and the click-through rates are substantially higher, and the costs, because of that, are a lot less. And it works very, very well. And these are just some examples of some of the different custom audiences that we have set up on different landing pages. Anyone who visits Linked University. Last 180-day visitors to Linked Selling. All sorts of different stuff. People that have already bought Linked University. All right? And so how that works is that if we've got a webinar coming up, we don't want to keep promoting it to people that have already bought our stuff. All right? And so then we can set up scripts on thank you pages that only people that have bought our program have seen. And so then we can tell Facebook, show this new ad to all these people who visited Linked University, but none of these people. And so that's some of the stuff you need to be thinking about as well. So regarding Facebook, the cost that we've been seeing recently is somewhere between $4 to $7 per lead. And that factors in, that's not 4 to 7 per click. That's factoring in, people that actually sign up for the webinar, registrants. Best we see is it typically doesn't get any better than 3. I mean, that's like a home run, and we're going to have a little office party and get some barbecue and stuff like that. But the worst is 17. The worst is 17, and then we just get rallies. So, but that's delicious too. But 17, though, I mean, is that terrible? Well, it depends on your audience. What's that lead worth to you? And then what's it worth paying for leads to your business is going to depend on how many of those people can you convert into actual clients or customers, what is your sales process, and how much money you're going to have to spend to generate the ROI that you need. So LinkedIn sponsored updates. This is something that LinkedIn rolled out within the last 12 months. And they've had their self-serve ad platform for quite some time. But sponsored updates now lets you put ads in the homepage feed of anybody you want to target on LinkedIn now. Okay, and that's what's new. And they call that sponsored updates. So here's an example of some targeting. So this was for that webinar I showed you a minute ago for coaches and consultants. And this update targets 210,000 people in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. In this targeting is targeting people that are in certain LinkedIn groups. So that's one way you can do it. And this is what shows up in their homepage feed. They click through to a landing page, they sign up, and all their dreams are realized in a very short amount of time. The cool thing about LinkedIn and sponsored updates is that they only charge you for website clicks, which is what you want. With Facebook ads and with Twitter promoted tweets, they'll charge you for engagements as well. So likes, comments, shares, anytime somebody blows their nose, basically, they charge you for it. So that's one good thing about LinkedIn. So this is some of the information they give you behind the scenes. As of right now, sponsored updates are, their self-serve ad platform is nowhere near as powerful as Facebook's. But you can still target in a lot of different ways that Facebook doesn't yet offer, because they don't have the kind of data that LinkedIn has on the business market. And so this is a campaign targeting financial advisors, and the moral of this story is that if you just set up one type of campaign on LinkedIn or Facebook or anything, and then what if the results don't work out, and then you say, oh, that didn't work, so that's no good. Well, if you only set up one type of campaign for a specific promotion or webinar that you're doing, then you're almost destined to fail anyways. And what you really need to do is find different ways of targeting and then see what works best. So in this case, this is 3 different sets of ads promoting the same thing, but just targeted in different ways. The first one targeted people based on their titles. The second one based on the companies they worked for, and the third one based on LinkedIn groups that they're a part of. And so you can see with this that in a short amount of time, we said, nah, these aren't any good. This one's really good. Let's just go with that one and pause the other 2. And so that was the one that we focused on for that campaign. And with LinkedIn sponsored updates, costs are a little higher, but it can depend. It can really depend. When we promote a webinar that is specifically for financial advisors, for example, we get murdered on Facebook. That's where we spend $17 a lead, whereas LinkedIn's going to be $4 or $5. It's just, that's the place to best reach those people. And so that's what you need to be thinking about. These aren't really universal truths. This is just what we've seen. So, hopefully, you can pretty much, though, count on that $5 to $10 is going to be about it. And so let's talk about Twitter promoted tweets real quick. Dale, how am I doing on time, Bill?
You got about 15 minutes.
15. I got to go fast. Twitter promoted tweets. I would encourage you to take a look at some of this stuff when I send it out. Not working quite as well for lead generation as some of the others, but it is doing pretty well for growing following and building, thought leadership and things like that. One of the things that we did recently was a webinar with Chris Brogan. And the moral of this story is that really you want to be looking for other people who have audiences similar to yours to partner with them. And this is something that we do all the time. We help some of our clients with this as well. And you can approach people like this and say, hey, I got a webinar, would you be interested in doing this together and promoting it to your community? And we'll just tell people we can either do it as an affiliate deal, or, what would you charge us just to do it as, we'll pay you to send out this email. And that's, sometimes effective. Similar to this, same type of thing. So Social Media Marketing Group is a massive LinkedIn group, 800,000 plus members. And we reached out to them and said, what would it cost for you to send an announcement to your entire group about a webinar we're running? And worked out a deal with them, and they did it, and we had several thousand clicks from that promotion. So that's something to think about as well. So now I'm going to have to move pretty fast through part 2, conducting an effective webinar. But what I'm going to talk about is 3 different types of webinars to consider. I'm going to move through the breakdown of our webinar outline template, which is one of the things I'll email you if you wrote your name and email on that list. And then some of the things we've done to get business directly off of webinars. So one way you can format webinars, if you're not even comfortable being the one presenting, or even if you are, but you like to mix it up so you're not always the one talking, is to do a guest series. So you bring other people on and have them on as your guest. All right, and that's a great way to go about it, since you're promoting value in different areas. And these are some examples that we've done. So this was one where we brought on a woman who had done a lot of cool things with generating publicity on her own, and people are always looking for new tactics to get PR. So we were happy to introduce her to our people. And then the other one on the right was a content marketing company called Influence & Co. that we invited to do a webinar on building thought leadership. And both of those were really good. And the people that are on our list enjoy getting all these different topics that I am not really an authority on, so I bring on other people to talk about them. Another concept that has worked very well for us, and people look at webinars often and think, this is going to take way too much time. And I got to talk for, what, an hour? That's too much. Well, you don't have to. And we've seen that by doing 20-minute webinars, people really actually prefer it. And it forces you to condense your presentation into a more, just a more concise format that really strips off all the fat, and there's just nothing but the meat on the bone there, and it's worked really well. So we do these, once a quarter or so, and get a pretty high turnout. And these have worked well for targeting really high-level people as well. C-level people in pretty decent-sized companies seem to really like this kind of concept. And then, of course, there's the traditional 60-minute webinar. If you've got a more long-form presentation, or if you've got something that you're going to be selling off the webinar. And there's a good reason why. You don't see too many people that have some sort of sales pitch or offer at the end of a presentation. They're not going to do that in a 20-minute format, So let's talk about that format. And you can take this, and I'll send you a copy of this PDF as well. And if you decide that doing something in a shorter format is a better fit for your business, then just, you'll be able to figure out how to strip it down to the things that are applicable to you. So, of course, it all starts out with a title slide. And like you saw at the beginning today, and like you see here, I like to put on the title slide in just a few minutes, ... And one of the good things about that is that then people that show up a few minutes earlier before you've started, they'll know that you haven't started talking yet and they don't have any audio issues. You'll get people, if you just have a title slide that says whatever the title of your webinar is, people will show up and be in the chat like, I don't know, has it started yet? Are you talking? I can't hear you. And that's a little bit of a logistical pain in the butt to have to answer them and make them feel comfortable. And you don't want them leaving either. So that's one thing that we like to do. One thing that we do, and I talked about that bonus concept earlier, so I'm not going to elaborate on it, but even if you don't have some sort of packaged free training, this bonus, and I'll show you what it was at the end, we just told people we've got a bonus at the end here that's an opportunity to spend some one-on-one time with me, and I'm going to show you how you can get that at the end of the call for everybody that's on. And so that's one way we positioned basically a complimentary consultation is what that is. And so the next thing that we often do is, title slide, hey, we got a bonus at the end, and then we get right into why should you care about this. So really trying to, get people excited about, holy crap, I'm glad I'm here because this is stuff that I need to be doing. So this was for financial advisors, and we first tried to, we set the stage using somebody else's study, something called ClientWise, to prove to them that you need to be growing your referral network. All right? Then we showed them a study by a consulting and market research firm specializing in the financial services sector that showed that more than 3 in 5 financial advisors who have leveraged LinkedIn in the past year have gained new clients as a result, even down to the gain in assets under management as a result of those clients they've picked up off of LinkedIn. And so by this point, and there's more to it than that, but I think you guys get the picture, but by that point, these guys are thinking, this is something I need to be paying attention to and doing. And that's really, what you want to get at that point. And then you have to kind of transition to, and now let me tell you why I am the person that you should be listening to teach you how to do this. Why am I credible to be speaking in front of you? And so I give them the story that I gave you guys at the beginning, some version of that, and try not to keep it too long. Like it says there, a few minutes max. I think that the days of talking about yourself for 20 minutes at the beginning of a webinar, that's really the best way to get people to drop off. Unless you're targeting the opportunity seeker that is just trying to figure out how to turn their $100 in the bank into $1 million. You know, maybe for that audience that works because you're trying to sell them the dream. But for the markets that I think most of us are going after, that isn't as effective. So then, of course, you want to hit on, okay, now I've told you about me, why we're here. Now here's what we're going to talk about today. So we're on to the agenda, all right? In this example here, all right, I use a bit of a flow chart to talk about the agenda. So it's a little bit more engaging than bullet points. At the same time, there's a lot on here, so I probably could have simplified it a little bit. But what it implied to them was I'm not just going to be going through a bullet point of things, but that I've got a process that I'm going to be walking you through today. And it starts with this, it goes to this, and then it's that, and then it's that. And that's the purpose of our time here today and what we're going to get into. So then after that, I dig into the content of the presentation, all right? And usually for an hour or so long webinar, I'll spend 20 to 30 minutes on the actual content that we've promised to deliver them, right? The things that we said, if you show up, this is what you're going to learn. You know, and we like to make sure that we, actually do what we say we're going to do on these things and not just give them some kind of high-level BS that leaves them feeling kind of cheated, and like it was a waste of their time. But in this case, I'm walking through the step-by-step of that, overview, that system that I told them we were going to teach them. And I've spent a lot of time on it. There's a lot more slides than just these 4. All right, but I'm of course giving you a condensed version of how we do this. And then after the content, we start talking about the social proof. All right, so clients of ours that have used this system have generated 81 leads in 5 months. Or for a different type of webinar where we're promoting Linked University. All right, so that's an important distinction to make here. This type of webinar here is, this webinar specifically was the one targeted to CPA firms where we were not promoting a $200 product. It was multiple thousands of dollars that we were asking them to commit to for hiring us, for us to manage lead generation campaigns for them. All right, so this is not Linked University. It's not selling some info product type thing. All right, and this is the kind of social proof that we used for that, in addition to something I'll show you in a minute. With Linked University, if you've got testimonials from people talking about the results that they've gotten by working with you or using your product or service, then that's great to use there. So we do a lot of that, of course. And you also want to talk about the companies that you serve. So for a webinar targeted at financial advisors, it's important that we show them, here's some of the firms that we've worked with and that are members of our program. And it makes sense that they're financial advisors. For that CPA webinar, we show it, and here's some of the clients that we've worked with, and maybe you recognize some of them. And that just shows people, wow, they're actually doing this. And if all those people are doing this, it must be good, right? And from there, the next section is justifying the ROI of doing this. And in this case, again, for that webinar for the CPAs, we're justifying the ROI before we tell them what our services cost, all right? Because we're trying to build up the value, if you will. And so in this case, we work through, we don't just throw all this information up there. We use animation so that it comes on the screen at the right time. But we're basically getting them to agree that this program will generate for them 67 leads over 12 months. And then we work through, what are those leads going to be worth to you? How many of those, based on your experience, can you convert? If you have 67 leads over 12 months, is it safe to say that 1 out of 6 will become clients of yours? And we talk with them, and most of them say, yeah, that sounds about right. And then we get to, what are the average fees that your clients pay you over the lifetime of your relationship? And we know, because we've done our research ahead of time, that for the type of people that are typically going to hire us, it's about $20,000. So most of them are not in their head. And so then the revenue generated over this 12-month campaign for the lifetime of these clients is $220,000. And so then when we present them with our program, they're already thinking about, okay, well, I know exactly what doing this is going to generate for me. And so then when we say, here's how much it costs for us to do that for you, they can then make a decision based on that. All right? And they're thinking about it in terms of the results. And so, on this webinar, we literally gave them a link to go to sign up, to use their credit card, to commit to a program that had, several $1,000 setup fees, and ongoing commitment for monthly management of the campaigns of anywhere, typically averaging around $1,000 a month, let's say. All right, so it's not the kind of thing that people easily pull their credit card out on, but when structured properly, when targeting a niche really specifically, it can be really effective. And utilizing that strategy, I believe off of 2 webinars, we signed 7 clients, something like that. So it was, pretty successful from our standpoint. I mean, so that'll easily be 6 figures over the lifetime of those clients for our business, and well worth the investment in putting them all together. And for Linked University, it's a little bit different. So if you have a product or something that's not such a relationship-based, like clients that you're doing work for on an ongoing basis, but you have something where you can sell people, like an info product, you can do things a lot differently and get a lot more people to buy them if you structure it the right way and have the right audience on. And a couple of the things that we do related to that is we make special offers based on price and time sensitivity. All right, so here's an offer that you can get this at a discounted price for this amount of time, but if you don't get in on it by then, it goes away. All right, and that's the best thing to do to get people to take action. And if you have that kind of product, the vast majority of people that are going to buy will buy live on the webinar. So offer them an incentive to do so, such as anybody that buys by the time we shut down the webinar, I'm also going to include for you a half-hour time of mine, one-on-one, or some other thing you can offer them to really say, man, I can't miss out on that. So I got to I got to take advantage of this now. Because if you give them too much time to think about it, most of the people just won't end up buying at that point because they're not excited the next day. I heard something from somebody once that the next day people will remember 50% of what you said. The day after that, 16%. 2 weeks later, 2%. Something like that, right? So you gotta get them while the getting's good. And then the bonus thing I told you about, I've talked about this a little bit, but it's just simply sending them a link. So if you want, here's the link to go get the free bonus. And then off of the CPA webinar where we were promoting directly to CPAs, I had 20 calls set up with people, and essentially at that point they're sales calls for me. I'm helping them, answering any questions they have about LinkedIn, and then it's also an opportunity for me to kind of probe them, find out kind of what their pain points are, and how we can help. So that's really the bulk of my presentation. The last thing I'll leave you with is that we're not going to do a Q&A now, but hopefully if you've been writing down questions, I'll be around to answer them as long as you want. Last tip that I'll make. When you're doing a Q&A, don't just throw up a slide that says Q&A. Leave whatever the thing is you want them to do. If it's an offer, a call to action, or your core message, leave that on the screen while you do the Q&A. All right? Because I think it's better for them to be looking at that during the Q&A than staring at the words Q and A. And yeah, And so for we did a 20-minute executive brief last week to coincide with the launch of Webinarly, and this was the slide that we had up on the screen at that time. And so for 20 minutes, people had to stare at this and think about getting 30 to 200 leads per month. And I think we generated 40 leads off of that webinar, something like that, from people that had filled out the form on the website for the campaign planning meeting to set up a call and talk about using our services. So it works really well. And at the end of the day, you might get some people that are directly off the webinar ready to engage with you. But the truth of the matter is that the bulk of the people will still need to be nurtured along the way, all right? Because maybe they just heard about you 2 weeks ago and they're not quite ready to buy yet. So if you don't have a way to figure out, one, who are the best leads to go after more directly, and then how to stay in front of all these people that are signing up for your webinars on an ongoing basis, if you don't have a way to do those things, then you're really missing out on the biggest piece of the puzzle. And that's what Tom's going to talk about next. So thanks.
Great job.